The F-14A Tomcat is an American Tier 7 plane located in the Navy line. Currently, it's the only active radar homing carrying plane. Because of that, most of your matches will look like this. Anyways, let's focus on its performance. I expected it to have a much worse flight model, but it's actually pretty decent. The top speed is very good. In fact, it's the highest in this tier. The stall speed is average and the optimal speed is okay, but thanks to your subpar energy retention you might have problems maintaining it despite having a decent thrust to weight ratio. The turn rate is surprisingly good, so you're gonna have no problems in one circle turns. Keep in mind that at higher speeds, the F-14 doesn't turn too well and overall feels sluggish. The bad roll rate doesn't help with it at all, however it doesn't ruin your performance. Overall, this plane feels like a giant boat with a good turn rate. It's similar to flying the MiG-29. Next is the offensive armament. You get the usual 20mm M61A1 Vulcan with 675 rounds when maxed. This is a good amount, but I've engaged in an unusually small amount of dogfight when flying this plane, so you won't run out of ammo. The best ammo belt is the tracer belt. I'll mention the missiles in more detail shortly. Lastly, I'll quickly go over the countermeasures, which you get a total of 60, 30 flares and 30 chaff. You drop 1 flare and chaff at a time, giving you 30 pops of countermeasures. Not the highest amount, but I personally haven't had any issues with that. Maybe because I kept dying. The first missile I'll cover is the AIM-9H, simply put, it's an AIM-9G. It has an infrared rear aspect heat seeker which already limits its usage. And the flare resistance isn't that good, the enemy doesn't have to cut the afterburner to dodge it. The range is okay, so you can surprise the enemy by firing it from a longer distance. It's not the most maneuverable missile, so don't expect it to pull insanely hard. If you can, get a better IR missile. And that better missile is the AIM-9L. Unlike the AIM-9H, it has an infrared all-aspect heat seeker. The AIM-9L can pull a lot of Gs, allowing you to get high off-ball launches. This can easily surprise the enemy, which most probably wasn't pre-flaring. It has a similar range and a better flare resistance. However, in front aspect shots it's still easily flared. Same can't be said for close range rear aspect shots, where even if the enemy cuts the afterburner, they won't be able to flare your AIM-9L. Also, after you fire it, it has a tendency to go after your teammate, so if you plan on firing it from a farther distance, make sure there's no teammates near the enemy. The only semi-active radar homing missile the F-14 can carry is the AIM-7F. This missile is nothing special, having okay performance and max G-pull. The guidance isn't the best, but most of the times it works just fine. You get it for free, so I'll quickly mention how and when to fire it. For the most part, it will be fired in head-ons. You want to make sure you're the first one that fires the missile. After doing so, turn as much as possible away from the enemy without losing lock. If the enemy doesn't do the same, he'll get hit by your missile first. Also, don't fire it from too far away or the enemy will have time to notch, and don't fire it from too close or the missile will not pick up enough speed to maneuver. Now it's time for the only active radar homing missile in Tier 7. The AIM-54A. Many people say this missile is overpowered. In some situations it is, but for the most part it's not better than some semi-active radar homing missiles. So how should it be fired? Well, firing it from long ranges has never worked for me, as most of my enemies knew how to notch, unfortunately. Anyways, I've had the most success by firing it from close ranges in head-ons. If the enemy is stubborn, he'll refuse to lose his radar lock on me, and since his search cone doesn't allow him to fly perpendicularly to the missile, he'll end up dying to it. But before the missile hits him, You must notch the enemy, otherwise there's a chance his missile will hit. If you fired it too soon, the enemy might notch it and still have time to pull into you, firing another missile towards you. That's where you either fire another AIM-54 or an AIM-7. Dodging it is quite simple. All you have to do is fly perpendicular to it and drop chaff until you don't have the launch warning anymore. The AIM-54A Mark 47 is the exact same missile but with a different booster. Personally, I prefer the AIM-54A Mark 60 because it has a booster that produces more thrust for a shorter amount of time, allowing it to maneuver quicker. This missile also costs a lot, so don't even buy it and spend your upgrade points for something else. Now I'll quickly go over the radar set present in the AIM-54A. If you watched any of my recent videos and you paid attention to the Doppler filter, you might say, wow, 20 meters per second is good. Well, it's not as good as you may think. When I said people easily notch the AIM-54, I actually meant it. But trying to hit that perfect notch while a missile was launched 4 kilometers away from you is pretty hard to do, so you'll most likely die. This radar doesn't have the greatest chaff resistance, so it will very quickly lock onto chaff if the enemy is notching. Here are some recommended loadouts. If you can, I highly recommend you use the second and third loadout shown here. Last thing I'll mention before moving on to the gameplay is the radar and RWR, starting with the radar. The F-14 gets the ANAWG-9, this radar is pretty good, having an OK Doppler filter and above average search cone. Most importantly, it has a TWS mode, which doesn't ping the enemy's RWR when you're locking them. If you soft lock someone, you can see everyone else. This is especially useful when you're in a situation where there's a lot of people around you. It's also recommended to use this mode for radar-assisted infrared missile launches. Launching a semi-active radar homing missile at an enemy while in TWS mode automatically switches to STT mode, also known as hard lock. This mode pings the enemy's RWR and makes you only see this person. STT mode isn't required for active radar homing missile launches. There's a lot to mention about this RWR. If you want, you can pause this video and read the full text. This is recommended if you want to understand how it works. Now all that's left to do is place the F-14 on this tier list. It's not hard to guess where I'll put the F-14, it's obviously gonna go in S tier. It has good performance, a good radar and active radar homing missiles. Only thing that could be better is the RWR and energy retention, but otherwise it's a very good plane. So, what do you guys think of the F-14? Do you think the active radar homing missiles are unfair? Comment down below. With that said, I thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.